I have a really distinct memory from my childhood that connects with the second lesson, the reading from the letter to the Colossians. I inserted a phrase as a child. May you be made strong with all the strength that comes from his glorious power, and may you be prepared to endure everything with patience, especially the sermon. And now here I am. I have another memory from when I was a kid. When I was a child, my home church each year for many years put on a passion play. And I remember a lot about the passion play. I remember the endless nights of rehearsal, the days dedicated to setting the stage, the installation of the professional light riggings, and the massive sound system. And of course, I remember the costumes. But I remember most one particular moment in the play, one particular line of the play. And here's why. Every year and every performance, this one guy would deliver his one and only line as if he would never again in his life have a line in a play. This was his line. We have no king but Caesar. I mean, this guy was supposed to be a first century Palestinian Jewish priest, but he gets so worked up delivering that line that he sounded more like an amateur actor reading Shakespeare. We have no king but Caesar. The line comes from John's Gospel. Jesus stands in Pilate's court before his accusers. Jesus is already bruised and bleeding. Pilate had already had Jesus flogged. We think that Pilate had hoped that this would appease the chief priests, but they were insistent, unrelenting. Finally, Pilate pleads, "Behold, your king. Shall I crucify your king?" And the chief priest answers, "We have no king but Caesar." And at this moment, we imagine a deep, sober, knowing expression on Jesus' face, knowing now for certain, without any doubt, that the cup prepared for him would not pass by him, that they would indeed crucify their king. Jesus understands. Once we place the whole of our devotion, the whole of our hope, the whole of our trust and allegiance, once we place these commitments upon an earthly throne or upon an oval office, an earthly ruler, or a symbol of earthly power, only heaven knows the wickedness we humans are capable of supporting, of condoning, and of even doing. God had warned the Israelites centuries ago about the dangers of desiring an earthly king. You desire a king like the other nations. You should not. They will become for you an idol, a person and a power into which you will pour out your allegiance, your loyalty, your future, all your trust. And they will tempt you with promises of greatness and with promises of fearless security and superpower. Or as C.S. Lewis might put it, earthly rulers will tempt us to make our good, natural loves for our own people and our own place, into our greatest love. And when that happens, we are even capable of cheering on the brutal death of Aslan. This past Friday was the feast of C.S. Lewis, a World War I veteran who lived through the Battle of Britain. To mark his feast on Friday, I reread a few of his chapters from his book, The Four Loves. And in chapter 2, Lewis gets at these dangers, the dangers of blind or full devotion to earthly rulers, of what he calls patriotism out of balance, where patriotism can become villainy because not constrained by fidelity first and foremost to God and to all God loves. This line leaped off the page. Powerful earthly rulers may by propaganda encourage a demoniac condition of our sentiments in order to secure our acquiescence in their wickedness. A demoniac condition of our sentiments. Or as Shakespeare himself put it, all this the world well knows, yet none know well, to shun the heaven that leads us to hell. Some Christians argue that we are by nature completely bad, totally depraved. Other Christians argue that we are by nature totally good, innocent until corrupted. And although if we're honest, we might agree, or at least concede, that we have more empirical evidence for the first, maybe we shouldn't pose our question this way anyway. Maybe instead we could simply agree that we are by nature tribal. And maybe that we are by nature tribal is the manifestation of the original sin. Maybe it's an aboriginal sin. But because we are by nature tribal, it actually seems to me that we are by nature capable of both much good and much bad. The love and the loyalties that we have for our own kind, our own people, our family, our own place, hearth and home, these loves and loyalties, when properly nested within a greater and more generous love of God and all that God loves, cultivates within us good qualities, fidelity and bravery and integrity for our own and even for the stranger. But when our tribal love becomes our greatest love, we become disordered and easily corrupted. It clouds our thinking and it can confuse our desires. As Lincoln put it, we can lose the gem of our character. We forsake our better angels. And we can end up sounding like the chief priest. All the priests, when they were debating what to do with Jesus, before they delivered the line, "We have no king but Caesar." This is when they agreed earlier in John's chapter 19, in John's gospel, better that one man should die than a whole nation. Better that one man should die than a whole nation. When our greatest love is tribal, we become capable of wickedness, either done by us or done under the shelter of our silence. I just don't think there is any way that any of us in this room this morning, if Jesus were physically right here with us, would attempt to excuse or defend stripping small children from their parents and keeping them in horrible conditions and holding pens. I just don't think we would do it. I mean, my father lived in an orphanage in the 1950s, and he had a warm bed and warm milk. Of course, that orphanage was run by the church and not by the state. We have no king but Christ. This ought to be our only confession. We have no king but Christ. Our finest and deepest loyalty, devotion, and allegiance first and foremost to Christ, the Good Shepherd King, who will not let us want. The crucified King, the risen King, the ascended King, who transcends our tribal boundaries of race and clan and class and the walls we build around them. The Lion of Judah King, a good king, but not a tame king. The king who refused the sword of the state and instead chose the spirit of righteousness. The king who from the cross said, and still says today, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." Amen.